Stun grenades fired as students take their fees protest to the union buildings. Robert McBride's future remains unclear amid calls for Parliament to finalise disciplinary action against him. A very good evening to you. You're watching eNews Direct. I'm Duduzile Ramela.
And I'm Sandy Legangose. Good evening.
To comment on any of our stories, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. That's at eNews Direct.
And tonight our hashtags are Freezer, March and Robert McBride.
Chaos outside the union buildings as police used stun grenades and water cannons to disperse a student gathering. Students marched on the country's seat of power earlier today in a march that's been deemed illegal by authorities. They are calling for the immediate release of their arrested cadres.
A 3-hour delay ahead of a march to the seat of government. With a list of demands in hand, these students, mainly from campuses across Gauteng, made their way to the president's doorstep.
Aside from the realization of free education now, the students are demanding the withdrawal of all officers from institutions.
Police response to judiciary issues isn't acceptable, and the lack of the government response to the protests is just sad.
We are fighting for our rights. Why are they trying to be here, acting all brutal on us? Because we're fighting for their kids too.
The march to Pretoria had the support of some parents. Even they believe that law enforcement authorities have been heavy-handed.
For our students to be actually be brutalized like this while they're in campuses, it's a worrying factor.
From the 1980s, I was a student at Wits University, and the police attacked us at university, beating us up, arresting student leaders. This is being repeated today.
The students have also called on the president to do something about their comrades who've been detained. Officials from the presidency came out to receive the memorandum of demands. They say everything possible is being done to address the fees crisis. But the march did not end as peacefully as it started. Running battles with police ensued, with officers using force to disperse the crowd. Leranzo Temba, Pretoria.
Meanwhile, at Wits University, several students have been shot and injured after police fired rubber bullets. The students were initially meant to march to the ANC's headquarters in downtown Johannesburg, but instead they ended up marching in Braamfontein.
The aftermath of yet another clash between police and students on Wits University's Braamfontein campus. Among those caught in the crossfire, 2 prominent student leaders.
Several students were injured, including 2 of our leaders, Busisiwe and Shaira. They're currently being treated. As I'm told, Busisiwe is having trouble breathing. Shaira she's just got some wounds on the back of her body. As I'm told, it's about 10 bullet wounds to the back of her body.
After the clashes, officers kept a close eye on activities on campus. After cancelling their plans to march to Lituli House, students took to the streets of Braamfontein in a peaceful march. But halfway into their walk, one of their leaders is apprehended.
Commander of the station, Commander, let me speak to him. All we want to do is go back to the university.
Luckily for him, his detention is short-lived. Students maintain there's a concerted effort by the police to clamp down on their leaders.
What they told me, we'll talk about it later. Let us march on campus and be disciplined like we have been disciplined. They want to provoke us. Let us not be provoked.
The protesters say they're not deterred by the police action and have vowed to continue with their protests. Sigela Lomdingi, Wits University, Johannesburg.
Let's focus on to other news now, and all the ministers in President Jacob Zuma's cabinet are united in their support for Pravin Gordhan. That's the word from Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, who addressed the media earlier today. The full support for Gordhan is in stark contrast to individual comments made by some cabinet members.
Speaking in their capacity as leaders of the Umkhonto weSizwe military veterans, these senior government officials took turns bashing Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan.
What we are arguing here is that if you are given an opportunity to respond through state institution, why then run to the media and give responses to the media?
But there was a statement that he made that people should rise up to defend him, because there are people who want to loot the money of the people. And that shows you that there's a person who's running away from something.
President Jacob Zuma's executive will now have us believe that all the ministers are united in their support for Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan.
On individual ministers commenting, the statement that I've just issued is a reflection of a cabinet decision. So this is a unanimous position of cabinet.
But will Gordhan survive long enough to deliver his medium-term budget next week?
Let me reiterate, we never discuss charges. We just discuss the principle that is based on our constitution, that the Minister of Finance is innocent until proven guilty.
The prescripts of the law is quite clear.
Last month, Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane announced a call for a judicial inquiry into banks, which was rejected by Cabinet. But despite all these public utterances and incidents, Khatebe insists that Cabinet is a united front. Olim Ngambi, Pretoria.
Robert McBride's future remains unclear. The police ministry is calling on Parliament to finalise disciplinary action against him. The embattled Independent Police Investigative Directorate head was expected to report for duty this week after over a year of suspension. However, Police Minister Nkosinathi Nhleko believes McBride must still face disciplinary action, even though the Constitutional Court ruled that it's not in the police minister's decision.
On Thursday, Robert McBride would not respond to calls for comment on his position as chief of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. He intended to return to his post after a constitutional legal battle over his suspension in 2015. But the police minister had other ideas.
It's about due process. It's about respecting the rule of law.
The Constitutional Court ruled that Nathi Nhleko did not have the power to suspend McBride for allegedly tampering with an IPID report into a legal rendition. It also ruled that both Parliament and Nhleko should decide on any disciplinary steps against McBride.
The Concord judgment on the 6th of September also ordered Parliament and the Minister to sit around a table and make a decision on whether to continue with the disciplinary action or not, which has not happened despite the Minister having complied with the aspect of that order.
Parliament also remained mum. The head of the Police Portfolio Committee not responding to requests for comment. But some experts believe there's a reason why Parliament is flat-footed.
In terms of the legislation that now applies, the Parliament would have to vote with a 2/3 majority to have the head of IPID removed. And the one party doesn't have a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly, so it's going to be very difficult.
The Independent Police Investigative Directorate is a critical body that oversees the conduct of the country's police. The longer the current situation remains, their ability to effectively monitor the actions of the SAPS is under threat. Nicolaus Bauer, Johannesburg.
The water levy charged to municipalities in parts of KwaZulu-Natal will soon be passed on to consumers. Some municipalities have been paying extra since last month. Now talks are underway on how to pass down the cost to residents. Umgeni Water says the measure is aimed at encouraging people to save water amid chronic shortages.
This precious resource, which is already in short supply, will be even more expensive soon.
The less you use, which means then you're incentivized to use less, it will then basically lead us to a position where we are able to have more water resources in the dams, because there will be less water being thrown out, thereby allowing us to then lift the restriction and also remove the surcharge.
Water restrictions of 15% are already in place in the eThekwini and Umsunduzi municipalities. At that level, the levy is expected to affect consumers' pockets by between 64 to 95 cents per 1,000 litres. But Umgeni Water says it's currently brainstorming with officials on the best costing models for each municipality. It's also disputed media reports that the levy is aimed at covering its revenue shortfall because of the drought. Not only did Umgeni Water's sales drop by 2.4%, its operating costs also increased by 9%.
It's unclear when the surcharge will be carried down to the consumer. Umgeni Water says it's still in discussions with various municipalities over when to implement the levy affecting residents. But many South Africans are not impressed.
I disagree with the levy. The only thing that I agree with is what they've done when they have cut down the water and made it come out slowly. I think that is as far as they should go.
More sort of effort should be put onto fixing existing infrastructure so we stop the water leaks, we stop these sorts of things from happening. We're losing an abundance of water.
Water officials say the recent rain did not make landfall in areas where water is desperately needed. Judith Subban, Durban.
In international news, police and protesters have clashed in Ivory Coast's economic capital. Demonstrators took to the streets protesting against a new constitution that will be put to a referendum at the end of the month. It scraps the requirement for both parents of presidential candidates to have been born in the country. National identity has long been a source of conflict in the Ivory Coast. And it may be a hat trick for American presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton. Polls suggest she won the third and final debate against Donald Trump. The Republican candidate has said he may reject the outcome of the November 8th poll if he loses. Clinton's described his comments as horrifying.
Tonight is part of his whole effort to blame somebody else for his campaign and for where he stands in this election. As I said, whenever he is losing, he says the system, whatever the system is, whether it's being in court about Trump University or losing the Iowa caucus in the Wisconsin primary or losing Emmys, for goodness sakes, he says that it's rigged against him.
Time now for all of your social media with Duduzile.
It is indeed. Thank you so much, Sandile. The Democratic Alliance will table a motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma again. DA leader Musi Maimane says the country needs to be released from what he calls the president's death grip as soon as possible. Maimane has accused Zuma of flooding state institutions with so-called yes men. We end with this. The Supreme Court of Appeal has dismissed an application by 3 UCT students and 2 non-students. They wanted the court to set aside a High Court interdict banning them from campus. Last month, the 5 turned down a compromise interdict. The deal offered them a chance to take part in campus activities on condition they committed to refrain from participating in violent protests at the university. If you've missed any of the stories we're tracking for you tonight, you can, of course, head on over to our Twitter and Facebook pages. That's at eNews Direct, or you can check out our website. That's eNCA.com/direct. Your business news as well as your weather after this. In money matters, MTN may have illegally moved more funds out of Nigeria than initially claimed. A preliminary probe shows that the amount of money moved by the telecoms giant exceeds the 195 billion rand previously alleged. Africa's biggest network by sales has, however, denied the allegations. Nigerian lawmakers are currently checking documents dating back 16 years as part of the inquiry. Hearings between MTN, the Nigerian Central Bank and 4 lenders are expected to be held next week. Let's see how the markets perform today. Here's Louis with all your weather details.
Welcome to the Weather Centre, everyone. While it was a foggy afternoon along the west coast of the country, with that fog making its way down to the peninsula, over the western interior it was mostly clear and dry, while towards the east showers and thunderstorms developed once again. It was another wet afternoon for many areas. Some of the storms in those areas became quite strong during the course of the mid to late afternoon hours, including some areas over northern KZN, the Free State, and in particular for the Eastern Cape. We had a couple of strong storms in that province. Let's move ahead to tomorrow's weather conditions, and KZN will be cloudy to partly cloudy as well as hot. We're expecting scattered thunder showers for the interior, but isolated closer to the coastline. In the Eastern Cape, a slight possibility for a few storms in the northern areas, sunny as you head westwards, and it's going to be a cooler and windy day for Port Elizabeth with a maximum of 21 degrees. A little bit of light rain possible for Cape Town as well as Langebaan. That'll be early in the day, drizzle for those areas, warm for the interior of the Western Cape. And in the Northern Cape, the only area that we're expecting rainfall is around Portsmouthburg and the Kuruman Hills, where a few thunder showers are likely to develop in the afternoon hours. For the Free State, a 60% chance for storms over the northern parts of the province, isolated for Bloemfontein with a high of 31. And the good news for the northwest is that the wet weather continues into tomorrow with a 60% chance for showers and thunder showers. Moving ahead into Limpopo, where we're expecting similar conditions, a possibility for showers early in the morning for some areas in the southern parts, keeping temperatures lower with lots of cloud cover. And we're going to see a fairly wet start to the day as well for some areas over in Mpumalanga, and along with that, temperatures also stay in the lower 20s for the afternoon. Into Gauteng, and it's going to be a cooler day for the province. There is a 60% chance for showers and storms as well. Pretoria reaches a high of 24 degrees. For the start of the weekend, little changes over the eastern parts of the country. Hot once again with thunderstorms for most areas, a possibility for a bit of light rain around Cape Town. And on Sunday it will be dry for much of the Cape provinces, especially near the western coastline, while the wet weather continues in the east.
Thank you, Louis. After the break. Three local artists joined forces, sharing their love of music and dance. Welcome back. Three local creative powerhouses are exploring the rhythms that connect music and dance.
They are indeed. Gregory Makoma, Simphi Wetana and Vota Kellerman are all collaborating in a production known as The Joys of Sharing.
And we caught up with them during rehearsals.
The Joys of Sharing, a creative collaboration of contemporary dance, melodies and vocals. It's the creative brainchild of dance genius Gregory Makoma, who brings on board Grammy Award-winning flautist Vota Kellerman and Simphi Wetana, a songstress whose sound needs a very little introduction.
Coming together of amazing artists in one space. I wanted to pause for a moment just to reflect on the beauty of our cultures and traditions.
Both Simphi and I gave Greg our music, and then he listened and he had a listen through to see what works best with dance. We work with the dancers and we see how it goes, and we change the songs again. And then we also newly composed some music, especially. We're all very perfectionistic. It has to be right.
And Vota also adds a really amazing and spiritual element to the collaboration with his flute. So it's going to be a very spiritual undertaking.
Joys of Sharing is on at the Lyric Theatre in Johannesburg on Friday and Saturday. Nondabeko Spisi, Johannesburg.
A reminder of the day's top stories before we say goodbye. Stun grenades fired as students take their fees protest to the union buildings. Robert McBride's future remains unclear amid calls for Parliament to finalise disciplinary action against him. And that's a wrap from the eNews Direct team.
Yes, indeed. Until the next time, take care.